I'd like to share a little insight from my experience as a gamer about some of the behavior that we're seeing in our society right now, but first I need to explain to you a couple game concepts. So this is from a game called Dominion, and in Dominion what you do is, for the first portion of the game, you're buying cards from this section of the offer down here, which are cards that give you abilities and resources that you need to build up your deck. So you're sort of playing your hand every turn, you're going through, you're figuring out how much money you have to be able to buy which cards you can buy, you're adding them over to your deck, you're shuffling through your deck, and you're generating new hands. You're creating for yourself a mechanism by which you generate resources, a mechanism by which you generate abilities that are going to impact you on further on down the game. But the ultimate goal in Dominion, as in many games, is just to have the most points at the end of the game. And the cards which actually give you points are these cards up here, the province, the duchy, and the state. Cards which represent land, privilege, title, basically becoming, you know, a wealthy landowning individual. The game itself ends when this stack, the province stack, is gone. What that means in practice is that in most games of Dominion, there are sort of two phases to the game. The first phase of the game is when everyone is building up their deck and they're trying to generate the mechanism by which they will gain resources. The second stage of the game is when people are in a race to see who can get the most of these provinces before the end of the game is triggered and we figure out who was the winner. In a game of Dominion, players are all watching each other for when that transition from the main game, while people are building up their decks, to the end game, while people are trying to get points, is going to happen. In other words, the behavior of the players between the main game phase and the end game phase changes. Dominion definitely isn't the only game like this. A lot of strategy games, in fact, have sort of a build-up phase where you're trying to accumulate resources or get yourself in some sort of board position, and then an end game phase where you're just trying to accomplish whatever the core objective of the game is. In chess, for example, the early game is all about board position and controlling certain areas and good defense with your pawns, and then the late game is all about how you can maneuver your opponent's king into checkmate. So a critical skill that every strategy gamer has to develop is the ability to tell when your opponent is transitioning from those early game tactics to those end game tactics. If you're still trying to build up your pawn wall while your opponent is already maneuvering to put you into checkmate, then you're going to lose badly. So what does this have to do with what's going on in our world right now? Well, it looks to me as if a lot of wealthy and powerful people in our society have transitioned into sort of end game behavior. They have decided to try and run up the score. They've decided to try and rack up points for themselves, rather than to continue to build up whatever resources or position or strategy it is that would make sense in a more early game type situation. This would explain, for example, why the current tax bill that's in Congress looks like a transparent robbery of the Treasury, a transparent desecration, a looting of the commons, taking away vital public services for the benefit of a relatively small group of people who are already fabulously wealthy. This explains things like the Panama Papers. The moving of resources into sheltered offshore accounts makes sense if you have no investment in trying to build up the common good at all, but you're just trying to secure things for yourself. The disregard for political norms, which used to be seen as ironclad, exemplified, of course, mostly in Trump. If in the near-term future you believe that none of the current political rules that we operate by are going to matter anymore because there's going to be an end to the game, some sort of catastrophe or something that's going to change everything and how it operates, then there's no reason to continue abiding by them in the present. You can get away with violating them. Essentially, I think that for a long time, liberals have been operating under the premise that the game of politics, that the game of our society was at root a cooperative game, like Pandemic or something, that, yeah, we were all taking our individual actions and maybe some of us benefit more than others slightly moment to moment in the game, but overall, we win or we lose together as a society. And what should be obvious to us is that a lot of people are actually playing Dominion, a strictly competitive game where there are winners and losers and they have no intention of being among the losers. And what should probably be terrifying to us is that a number of people who have been playing that competitive game have moved solidly into end game behavior, which means from their perspective, this whole charade is just about over. If we continue to allow this game to be played as though it is a competitive, zero-sum game, if we continue to play the game of Dominion, that the humanitarian and ecological costs are so extreme as to constitute the greatest crisis that we as a species have ever faced.